All right, so hello everyone, this is Mercedes Bautista, and for my presentation I have selected a phrase from the reading Souls of Black Folk, Chapter 1, titled Of Our Spiritual Strivings by W.E.B. Du Bois. And the specific phrase I've chosen is the unattained ideal, looking at it through a critical race theory lens. Okay, so in order for me to explain the unattained ideal, I do have to reference some of our other readings to reinforce my selected phrase, but for now, let's look at what critical race theory is. I think it is best stated by Kimberly Crenshaw in an interview with MSNBC, where she states, critical race theory is not so much the thing, it's a way of looking at a thing. It's a way of looking at race. It's a way of looking at why after so many decades, centuries actually, since emancipation, we have patterns of inequality. Meaning that critical race theory can be a method or a tool for understanding these patterns in hopes of attempting to reconstruct a racially divided America. And it's essential to remember that race is a social construct created by people, and therefore it is the responsibility of people to try and fix the damage that came with separation. Now, where I draw my attention is to this passage from Du Bois, where he states, "The nation has not yet found peace from its sins. The freed man has not yet found in freedom his promised land. Whatever of good may have come in these years of change, the shadow of deep disappointment rests upon the people, a disappointment all the more bitter because the unattained ideal was unbounded save by the simple ignorance of a lowly people." So these are some of the key elements to take into consideration from that passage. First, has not yet found peace. The people of a nation have not collectively found the means to recognize and change. Second, freed man has not yet found in freedom. Those who are promised equality don't actively experience equal. 3, deep disappointment. This deep disappointment is rooted in the nation's inability to give what is rightfully theirs. 4, ignorance of a lowly people. That ignorance comes from those who consciously or unconsciously participate in racism, regardless of how much progress we believe has been made. Then, of course, we have that which is unattained, which essentially is a point that we as a society have not yet reached, but ideally want to reach. Now, consider the specific verbiage. Unattained suggests a goal that has yet to be reached, but it is not unobtainable, because like Benjamin argues, every quote generation quote does carry the ability to progress, but that will depend on a people's willingness. Then the concept that something is ideal is not in a utopian manner, but rather it is something that is satisfying to our expected needs of liberty. I also looked at this phrase like a scale, meaning that there is an ultimate goal or aim, but we could move further and closer to the unattained concept. Therefore, consider this quote from the passage. "The ideal of liberty demanded for its attainment powerful means, and these the 15th Amendment gave him." Simply claiming that someone is free does not mean that they are truly free unless they receive the full extent of their promised liberty. And this is where the miscommunication normally begins, because if people aren't willing to understand that, which normally entails accepting or admitting to an ongoing issue, then people won't see that there is in fact an unattained level of liberty, which not every race has. And of course, we go from the emancipation in 1863 to the establishment of the 15th in 1870. But that did not mean that those in power were willing to fully undergo a racially united America. So to what can we pinpoint this unwillingness? We may ask ourselves using critical race theory. Of course, there are countless factors that go into that ignorance, which Du Bois reminds us of. But the sense of denial can be seen and can be experienced now. As he states, and the nation echoed and reinforced this self-criticism, saying, "Be content to be servants, and nothing more. What need of a higher culture for half men?" And this quote, to be content, refers to the idea of having made some type of progress to an extent. Therefore, one should be comfortable with the position they are in. But you see, even denial now can be witnessed with critical race theory. Recall our reading, "Denial is the Heartbeat of America" by Kendi. Here we understand that often when America is faced with a desire to change, but if the behavior or elements of it don't fit a social norm, it is quickly deemed un-American. Denial is both a mental state and something that is very tangible, which can be applied to many occurrences that have happened in our past and present. For example, Kendi states, "Nothing has caused more human carnage than the American denial." Denial can also be the denial of the being, which has caused in our history undeserved death. But even in the present, we have instances of this. For example, when police brutality essentially killed George Floyd, his life was taken out of pure ignorance for human life. Denial of history itself, which we see now as people oppose the teachings of critical race theory in schools because it allegedly teaches hatred. But for this discourse, that would mean closing the narrative of struggle for the sake of a clean consciousness. Denial is essentially one of the greatest threats to the unattained ideal, for it causes resistance to our desired aim. And of course, of this denial, there are the effects. In particular, Du Bois emphasizes these two elements. First stating, "Then it dawned upon me with a certain suddenness that I was different from others, or like mayhap in heart and life and longing, but shut out from their world by a vast veil." This veil suggests a barrier between the races, which, although not physically there, it is an accumulation of factors that prevent comprehension, often causing isolation and undesired separation. Second, it is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others. This double consciousness is the disadvantaged race recognizing their own existence, but at the same time understanding that it is not how others perceive them as. And it is so significant to remember that both of these concepts are results of experience, and it's one of the many reasons why critical race theory is so important to utilize when looking at our social structures, as it can bring aid to those who have experienced such unfortunate notions. Now, on a broader spectrum, discourse about race, denial in America, the effects of injustice, and that which is unattained all play an active part in what Benjamin's concept of, quote, historical materialism, quote, suggests. So here I selected a quote from Du Bois where he states, "Through history, the powers of single Black men flash here and there like falling stars, and die sometimes before the world has rightly gauged their brightness." Meaning that voices are constantly being lost in the making of history. And because of factors like denial, which opponents of critical race theory often embody, we ultimately run the risk of getting further to the unattained ideal for America. Of course, this is what Benjamin calls our, quote, weak messianic power, quote, which is our generation's ability to carry out change by understanding the past and how it affects our present and future. So with this being said, one of the biggest reasons why I particularly chose to focus on this phrase was because, of course, Du Bois did a wonderful job of providing us with lived experience. But what immediately drew my attention to the phrase unattained ideal is knowing that because we haven't clearly reached an ideal society that embodies ultimate unity, we have to keep that an active conversation for critical race theory to continue its aim. So with that being said, this concludes my presentation, and thank you for listening. This is my works cited page. And now we can move on to questions.